Gentlemen, thank you very much for your presence here today. All of you have served our country. Mr. Gold and Mr. Bridenstine, Lieutenant General. Mr. Cutler, you served the United States Senate as part of our staff in Commerce, Justice, Science, and I thank you all for the knowledge that you bring forward to us today. I want to start first with the appropriations process, and Mr. Gold, maybe Mr. Bridenstine or others would care to comment. I'm worried that, once again, we'll end up in a continuing resolution. I'm worried that Commerce, Justice, Science is stalled, and I would welcome your efforts in the work that you now do to make certain that's not the case by encouraging support from all of my colleagues. But I'd like to have you tell me what you see occurring, good and or bad, from the passage of the Commerce, Justice, Science bill, particularly as it relates to the funding of NASA. Mr. Bridenstine.
So first of all, I think it's important that to the extent that we have a CR, it's better than a shutdown. And I think we all understand that, but CR is also, it's stunning to me that people are now advocating for CRs. I want to be clear, we need to be advocating for appropriations because ultimately technology is changing, capabilities are changing, and we need to be able to change programs commensurate with the times and not just fund things the way they used to be, because then we buy obsolete things and we don't buy the right things. So 100% we need to do appropriations. I do worry that, when we think about how we get the NASA funded, the reconciliation bill went a long way to supporting human spaceflight. But there's a lot of other parts of NASA that are critically important. And I would say the Science Mission Directorate largely is not partisan. It's not political. There's a lot of bipartisan consensus around it. We're talking, the gentleman behind me, Bill Nye, he does not like my politics. You're probably aware of this. But I will also tell you that he and I agree strongly that we need planetary defense. We need the ability to look out in space and see large objects that could really hit Earth and do it damage. And not only that, but we need to be able to intercept those if necessary. And that's what our space program is capable of doing. It's an element of the Science Mission Directorate inside NASA, and it needs to be funded. But all this capability largely comes from our ability to do planetary science. When we go to Mars, and we land on Mars, and we go to every planet in the solar system. These are unique capabilities that only this nation can and has done, every planet in the solar system. And beyond that, we've got missions to the sun for heliophysics, and we've got astrophysics. I got beat up in this committee, Senator, a lot over the James Webb Space Telescope, probably because of this guy down here on the end, Mr. Cutler. But I will also tell you, that now that it's in space, everybody knows that it sets America apart from the rest of the world by 50 years when it comes to physics. Like, that's the impact. 50 years when it comes to physics. People say, well, why do we need to look at the stars anyway? There's a great story I like to tell about Einstein and his understanding of time-space continuum, which ultimately is critical for how we use GPS today. Basic science resulted in us understanding time and space in a way that we otherwise wouldn't, and it enables GPS to function. That's the type of science that we get from NASA, and that's the type of capability. James Webb, we're gonna learn things about things like dark matter, and which I hate to even use that term because nobody really understands it or knows what it is, but dark energy and all these different capabilities, we're learning things that have never been discovered before, and it sets us apart.
Thank you. A couple of observations. The Webb came close to being terminated for lack of progress, and the decision was made to continue.
Thank you.
And it seems well worth the difficulties that we went through. Secondly, I've not said this publicly, but I can intend to vote against a CR, which would mean a shutdown. And I've said this in previous years. We've gotten to the point in which it's easier. As long as it's easier to do a CR than it is to do appropriation bills, we apparently are not going to do them. And it is a mistake for this Congress to get in the habit of continuing resolutions And unless there's a consequence, we're going to do them every year. So I think my hope is that I'll have colleagues who join me in the effort to make sure the appropriations process does not end its time early in this 2005 session. A couple of other things that I want to ask before I turn it over to my Democratic colleague, Mr. Lujan. Let me make sure, because a couple of my questions have now been answered, and you've talked so long, Mr. Bridenstine, that I've run out of time. Let me go to you, General
It happens. Sorry.
I'm surprised that you were never served in the United States Senate. General Shaw, your testimony, you speak to the necessity of establishing a grand strategy, of which the Chinese have already adopted, quote, to unify and synergize our national efforts across civil, commercial, and national security activities, and that we risk losing our domination in space without one. What are the pillars of a successful grand strategy capable of beating the Chinese in space? And it's also important that we concentrate some time and energy, some effort in knowing what follows once we get back to the moon in our long-term goals, what they should be. How does the strategy deal with getting us back to the moon, and then also the long-term strategy of what happens next?
So I would think that if in the formulation of such a strategy, probably the overarching objectives extend well beyond us returning to the moon. It is about what do we want to accomplish in this century or in the Earth-Moon system and beyond for the benefit of the nation, and those are not going to be solely exploration objectives. They're going to be about economic growth and about the appropriate security framework to ensure that we can set the conditions for that economic success against all of the forces that this panel has already talked about, and against the additional challenges we face if China gets there first and starts to establish the ground rules almost literally on the surface of the moon. And so I say that if we think of it, it's just that strategy has to be something that now establishes an architecture and a framework that lasts to the end of the century and beyond. That has to involve all of the elements of national power and all of those key pieces I mentioned in progress in any domain: exploration, economic growth, and security measures. We don't really do that today with regard to space. We do it sometimes by accident, but it's never by design. And I would love to see us approach that from a national perspective by design. And then as you lay out the objectives and subjectives, and you now identify the ways and means to achieve those objectives, assigning those to the appropriate part of our nation, not necessarily our government, but maybe we rely on industry or commercial to help with some of those, or the scientific community to help with some of those objectives. I just lay out that framework for you, Senator, is something that doesn't really exist today that could help us. The Chinese do have that kind of framework. They have exactly that kind of framework. And that's what's enabling them to continue to meet their milestones and goals that they have put out. And by the way, they are amazingly consistent. They predict what they're going to do, they say what they're going to do, and then they do what they said they were going to do. We should actually use that to our advantage to really kind of understand how that's going to lay out. And so I hope I've answered your question, but that's how I would approach such a strategy, and looking at it long-term and how we can bring all of the nation to bear on that.
General, I appreciate your answer, and I've run out of time, but in the meantime, while we develop that strategy that we should already have and we implement it and we follow it, I worry about what happens to our supply chain as we provide such uncertainty in today's world, the current problems. And that supply chain across the country is really the way that we do get back to the moon and the way that we continue our efforts. So a lot of long-term and short-term concerns.